Mr. Miliband, is this new announcement on housing an actual manifesto commitment? Because it's not in the manifesto.
Absolutely, and it's on our pledge card. It's our 6th pledge. And I think it's so important because I think it goes to the big argument of this election. Do we build a country that works for working people again? Or do we have a country that just works for the richest and most powerful? And I think housing and the failure to build homes is one of the big signs of that, and the failure to help first-time buyers. And that's why I'm proud of our announcement to say there'll be no stamp duty payable on homes up to £300,000 for first-time buyers for 3 years under a Labour government.
So the stamp duty announcement, I just want to clarify this, it isn't actually in your manifesto, and these documents have a certain importance constitutionally. Is it a manifesto commitment?
Yes, you can hold me to it.
OK, well, we will. OK, on housing. Now, you made much of the coalition record on house building, and that's house building completions. On starts, it's the Labour government, in which you were a cabinet minister, that had the record low of 88,000 in England for housing starts, partly because of the financial crisis. But at the time, that government had promised 200,000 or 300,000 a year. So why should we believe you now when Gordon Brown made the same promise in 2007?
Well, we didn't do enough. The last Labour government didn't do enough. But my contention to you, Faisal, is this government isn't doing enough either. And when you've got a situation where it's the worst record on home building since the 1920s, we know we have to act. And it's us that have a comprehensive plan, recognised in the housing field, the Lions plan, a comprehensive plan to build 200,000 homes a year, and not just build homes, but to help first-time buyers, as we're outlining today. So, I think the reality is that no government for a generation has really got to grips with the issues that we face in housing. But the government I lead, if I'm elected on May the 7th, will do so.
200,000 homes a year in England. We haven't had that since 1989. It doesn't seem like there's a radical change in policy on supply or planning. Wouldn't that require building on the green belt? I don't see that in the manifesto, Mr. Miliband.
Well, let me set out what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to break the hold of some of the developers. So we're going to say that developers can't simply sit on land and wait for it to accumulate in value, even when it has planning permission, and we'll give councils powers to say use the land or lose the land. Secondly, I think the change we're making in relation to planning permission, which is to say that when planning permission is granted, local councils can set aside the housing for people who've lived in the area for up to 50% of the housing, for people who've lived in the area for up to 3 years, will unblock some of the local scepticism about building homes. We're going to give loans to some of the small developers who don't feel they have access to the market. So it's a pretty comprehensive plan. It's been worked through with the housing sector by Michael Lyons. It's a plan I'm proud of, and it's a plan I believe will deliver.
On the stamp duty cut, I mean, you're an economist. You know that a stamp duty cut will just result in higher house prices.
No, it depends what you do in relation to supply. And that's why the two things come together. The cut in stamp duty, the fact that zero stamp duty will be charged on homes up to £300,000 for first-time buyers for 3 years, combined with the plan to build homes. You've always got to act on both of these things. You've got to act on demand and, if you like, making things more affordable, but also on making sure you build the homes so house prices aren't out of reach. And it's the two that come together that I think is such an important part of our plan today.
When you look back, though, I mean, the big question mark in the country as regards Labour and trust in you, 10 days ahead of a period when you might become Prime Minister, is that record. And we've had focused apologies. And I'm not trying to get you to say sorry. Has Labour learnt the lesson of things like a trebling in real house prices? That's the cause of the unaffordability. Do you accept that the trebling of real house prices under Labour was a problem and not a glorious vote-winning glory for the United Kingdom?
We didn't build enough homes, definitely. You're right, we didn't build enough homes.
Was the trebling of house prices a problem? From 1970
well, I certainly think the fact that house prices get out of reach for people was a problem, and it remains a problem under this government. You know, we're talking about house prices now that I think are on average 8 times the average wage. And the question people have to ask at this election, Faisal, is who's really going to make a difference on these issues? You know, I think this housing issue goes to this wider question about what kind of country we want to be. Who do we want to be run for? Do we want to be a country that puts working people first, my plan for the country, or do we want more of the same of what David Cameron has to offer?
What about MPs? You've gone on about speculators and landlords. I think 30-plus Labour MPs are buy-to-let landlords. Should they not be buy-to-let landlords?
Well, we're not trying to stop anyone being a buy-to-let landlord. We want good landlords, but I think the proposal that we announced yesterday is an important proposal, which is to say that when landlords get tax relief, for example, for wear and tear on accommodation, we should make sure that that housing is of decent standard. And we want stability, greater stability for people in the private rented sector. It's really interesting this. Think about what I said yesterday about 3-year tenancies, not 1-year tenancies, with predictable rent changes in those 3 years based on the rate of inflation. The Conservative Party have no answer. They've got no answer today on our housing proposal. They had no answer yesterday. And that's because I think they don't really have answers to the central problems that working people are facing in our country.
In terms of the other lessons, clearly the IFS, it's not just about house building. You always say that the thing that you apologise for in terms of Labour's record is what happened in the banking sector. Do you not accept that the total failure to regulate the banking sector had an impact on the fiscal deficit? That the two things go together. You can't separate those things out. And that was Labour's fault.
Well, you're absolutely right that the financial crisis is what caused high deficits all around the world. And you're absolutely right about the chain of events. So it was failure to regulate the banks,
which was Labour's
where we made a mistake along with governments around the world. I mean, indeed, David Cameron was urging less regulation, but leave that to one side. Indeed caused deficits around the world. President Obama is still dealing with that. Governments all around the world are dealing with it. The question for this election, though, is who's going to get the deficit down, who's going to do it in a fair way. Now, I think we've got the sensible balance plan. You've got some people who are saying no cuts. You've got David Cameron who wants to double the cuts next year, which will have terrible effects on our NHS and other public services. We've got a sensible, balanced plan, cutting the deficit every year and balancing the books.
But it's consistent with a £90 billion deficit by 2020, over a decade after the crisis. That's what the IFS say.
I don't share that view, and let me explain why. We want to run a surplus on the current budget. That's our fiscal rule. That's our commitment, cutting the deficit every year and having net debt falling as soon as possible in the next Parliament.
It's vague. You have a lot of wriggle room there, don't you, to borrow more?
It's a clear timetable, and it's the right timetable. And the difference with our manifesto is that there are no commitments which require additional borrowing, none on current or capital. And what a contrast, Faisal, with the Conservative Party, who are flinging around commitments on the National Health Service, on tax cuts, on right to buy, on rail, without any idea where the money's coming from. I think that's one of the interesting things about this campaign, is that you've seen the Conservative Party flinging around commitments without a sense of where the money's coming from, and Labour, where everything is costed and it's clear where the money's coming from.
Your ex-cabinet colleague Peter Mandelson has a little private consultancy, and he's in that written a note, his global counsel, saying that the SNP would push a Labour government to the left and result in higher public spending. Your ex-cabinet colleague's own consultancy said that.
Well, that's not right, because I'm absolutely clear. We're going to stick to our plans on the deficit, and I'm working for a majority Labour government, but we are sticking to our plans on the deficit. We're going to get the deficit down every year. We're going to balance the books. We're going to run a surplus on the current budget. I'm absolutely clear.
On this issue of housing, though, it's an English-devolved issue. We have separate policies in Scotland. Surely it could not be right that Scottish MPs would also have a say on an issue like the one you're talking about today on housing and stamp duty.
Well, if you're asking me to rewrite the way the House of Commons works on the back of an envelope, I'm not going to do that, because I think our constitution and our United Kingdom is too important to play games with. That's David Cameron's approach. That's what he's done ever since September the 19th of last year. So the approach I'll take is to have a proper constitutional convention to look at all of these issues and to do them in the right way.
Convention? Would the SNP be included in that constitutional convention?
Well, look, we've said we'll include all the nations and regions of the United Kingdom. It's not so much about specific parties, it's about the nations and regions of our country in a constitutional convention.
On that same issue, do you feel that has the issue of Scotland and the rise of the SNP, the latest poll suggests you could be wiped out entirely, 54% for the SNP?
Well, let's see what happens on May the 7th. I take an old-fashioned view on this. I think there are 10 days to go till this general election. The people will make their decision soon enough. I think for people in Scotland, there's a clear choice. A road to a second referendum, which is what the SNP want. They used to say it was once in a lifetime, once in a generation. Not anymore. They want a second referendum in the next 5 years. I think that's wrong. It's not my plan. It's not what I want. Or a Labour plan for a road to a fairer economy. And really, you're going to either end up with a Labour government or a Tory government after this election. I'd urge everyone in Scotland to vote Labour, because I don't think people in Scotland want another Conservative government. I'd urge them to vote Labour for our fairer economy.
Would it be legitimate for the leader of a second-place party to become Prime Minister?
You're inviting me into
in theory.
Post-election.
In theory. I'm not talking about you specifically.
Speculation. You know, I'm going to concentrate on saying to people, setting out the choice to people between now and May the 7th. I'm thinking up to May the 7th at 10 p.m. This is such a consequential, such an important election for the British people, and this is their time. This is once in a 5 years choice. You know, this choice doesn't come along very often, and I'm urging them to choose Labour.
Are you comfortable with the idea that in 2 weeks you could have your finger on the nuclear button?
I'm ready to be Prime Minister, and I'm ready for the responsibilities that entails. And I believe that in this campaign we've set out a plan for working people here at home, but also a plan for Britain to be strong and confident in the world.
Are you a person who could accept the idea that the decisions that you make might incidentally cause civilian deaths in the name of national security? Can you accept that trade-off?
I'm not going to sort of enter hypothetical things about what I might face as Prime Minister, but I can say this to you. I'm ready for what the job entails, and I'm ready for all the difficult decisions that the job entails, including matters of peace and war. And I've shown in this Parliament the approach that I'll take. The approach that I'll take on issues like Libya, where I supported the government's decision to work with other countries and to intervene, and on Syria, where in the summer of 2013 I said no. So I'm ready for the decisions that the job of Prime Minister entails.
One last question about the nature of the campaign. Certainly there's a contrast. You haven't been on the SNP campaign or the UKIP campaign. They're much more comfortable, much freer, walking the streets, all that sort of stuff. Forgive me, but with both Mr Cameron's campaign and your campaign, things are a little sterile in these types of theatres. Do you not want to get out there and actually meet the people rather than just Labour activists?
You know, that is what I do. And you know, look, tomorrow I'm going to be in Wales and I'm going to be doing what we call a People's Question Time, where we invite people who are not Labour supporters to come and talk to us to persuade people. So I absolutely am getting out there and talking to people about a whole range of things. And you know, I'm somebody who throughout this campaign has been taking questions from members of the public and setting out the big choice. And I think that's what people want, the big choice and also big ideas to change the country. You know, what we're talking about in housing today, what we're going to do if we get elected in 10 days' time is about changing the country so it works for working people. And I'm pleased about the way we're laying out that choice before people in this campaign.
Thank you very much, Mr Miliband.
Thank you.
Cheers.